Iris hasn't followed much of this, but she's interested that it bothers her mother. A spiritual awakening in that old iron contraption of a heart. Too hard to fathom, Iris moves on and says, "I bet you're not portraying me as Venus or another ancient spirit from another land." He moves away from the board, squints at it with one eye. He frowns. "No," he says. "No, Iris, you're right about that." "I want to see." "Go get your sister from the meadow, it's late. Where are my flowers today?" "Let me see." "Get out of here," he cries, angry now. Iris leaves, though not fleeing. She leaves with dignity, carefully knocking over a pot of ground powder onto the stone floor. He curses her clumsiness. She doesn't reply. She's still sulking when she arrives in the meadow. Something is happening here that she doesn't like. The master is a kind man in some ways, but he makes her angry. He is framing her on his board, but he is framing her in the room too, keeping her in a box, away from him. She might not be beautiful, but he is keeping her small. Margaretta can't help much. As far as the master's concerned, Margaretta is little more than an annoyance. Even Iris, who loves her, can see that. Margaretta is one of the irritants of the world, a black fly at the behind of the cow. No, it's up to Iris to be patient and behave, or the family will be back on the street again. And now that Iris has seen the legless dwarf, heard about the girl-boy of Rotterdam, who knows what bizarre villains lurk farther inland? It might not be an enchanted castle and a sugar-voiced godmother. It might be major imps and minor demons, huge bumblebees with claws, or even some fierce god disguised as a bull to kidnap poor girls and do what bulls are well known to do. "We'll give him his monstrosity," says Iris suddenly. Ruth looks up from the late daisy heads she is shredding. "He wants to catalogue all the quirks of the world? We'll queer him for him, Ruth." Ruth likes the sound of bravery, which hasn't been heard much since leaving England. Iris wheels about the meadow, laughing, thinking. She lunges at the old apple tree and brings down a dead branch and snaps the brittle limbs just so. "Antlers," says Iris, "for the girls stagger the meadow." They link hands and run home. Margaretta is out at the well or the market square, away somewhere. The master is busy in the second studio, the gallery of God's mistakes. So it's easy for Iris to slip in and finger some dun-coloured paint from the long board that serves as a palette. In the shed at the end of the kitchen yard, she coats Ruth's face. "You're a beautiful girl stag," she croons, to keep Ruth from scraping the muck off with her hand. "Can you sound like a beast?" She knows the answer to this already. Ruth obliges with a passionate moo. "Close enough," says Iris. Ruth on her hammy hands and strong knees. Iris finds a long cord in the kitchen and ties the rack of apple bough antlers on Ruth's head. Iris drapes the length of brown, foul-smelling sacking over Ruth's back. The pelt. Then Iris kneels behind her sister, right up against her, like that bull Zeus pressing against a cow. She ties the ends of the sacking around her own waist to show that they are one two-headed creature, covered by the same hide. "Now, Ruth," says Iris, "we'll amble to the studio and have our portrait drawn. We'll make the master laugh, and he'll forgive me for how I bother him." They clump and thump across the yard, Ruth mooing the announcement of their arrival. Silence in the studio as they cross the threshold. When the girl stag crawls around the corner made by a painting propped against a stool, They see the master has returned from the second studio. He's sitting there with an open mouth. He stares at them. He's not alone. The visitor is a younger man with a tender beard beginning on his chin, and none of the stoutness that proves the success of greater men. He perches on a stool, mopping a hunk of bread in a broth of milk and onions. "Oh, a household pet!" he cries, and jumps up, knocking over the stool, spilling his broth, bumping into the knees of the master. "I was expecting the brilliant daughters of my housekeeper," says the master. "Instead, let me introduce you to some beast of the forest." Ruth moos, delighted, unable to hear condescension in the master's voice. Iris is mortified, but gamely keeps on. "We're the girls' stag of the meadow," says Iris. "Are we ugly enough now to suit you?" "The disguise is impeccable," says the master dryly. "I'd never have known you but for your dulcet tone." Despite himself, he starts to laugh. "Iris, you have some cleverness about you. But you're late, daughters, and you worried your mother. She went to look for you. You worried me, too. There's supper in the kitchen. Now, look, this is our Caspar. Feckless Caspar, returned from The Hague. Silly Caspar, unable to solicit a single commission on this trip, though he carried letters of testimony from patrons in all the courts of Europe." "I wrote the letters myself," says Caspar boastfully. "Which is Iris? And which Ruth?"